Hey guys, welcome to Prepper Talk Radio. I am Scott, and we got Shane and Paris in the house, and this is Preparedness, the podcast of preparedness, the radio for the ready-minded. This is the live stream for those who don't want to swim upstream, but who want to just thrive during the down cycles, right?
The live stream,
The live stream,
not the die stream. The live
this
stream.
is the live well stream. Like, I don't know. I just can't say enough good things about being better prepared and taking preparedness into your own hands. Today, we're going to be talking more about food storage, kind of an advanced look at it, because a lot of the things we've talked about have been the basics, how to start, right? How to get going. But we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the more advanced or in-depth things you can be doing, different strategies. But I want to remind you, as we do every episode, we let you know about some ways to help sponsor or ways to help promote the show, and help us keep making more episodes. And one of those ways is by checking out our affiliates. You can go to our website, preppertalkradio.com, and you can see a lot of our resources there. You can see the books that we recommend, and you can kind of check all of that out. But I want to remind you guys, if you're tired of all the woke agendas at all the stores you're going to, there's another option. You can pretty much replace every one of your household use items, like your cleaners, your deodorants, some of the different like sunscreens and skin treatments, and even, I mean, there's just a huge list. We found a American owned, American made, American sourced and produced company. You can check it out. Go to patriotswitch.com/prepper talk. And you can check it out. And we'd love to talk to you more about it and kind of show you what we've done, what we like about it. But check that out. It's a great way to take that money away from those woke companies, away from those greedy Walmarts and Targets who don't care about you, and put it into pockets of American people working in American factories and making American products. So shorten that supply chain and take control of where you're spending your money. So with that, I want to jump right into food storage. Now, I was joking about this with some in-laws just the other day, and the joke was basically, when it comes to, that's just an SHTF scenario, and the grocery store is shut down and everything else shuts down, and all of a sudden everybody shows up at your house because you're the only one that's been preparing, and everyone knows that in your family, right? And what that conversation is going to be like. And sorry, I said it was family. It was a buddy of mine, and it was hilarious because he's like, here's what we're going to do. There's going to be one meal a day. Anyone who thinks they can eat more than one meal a day is going to get shot. So get out of my kitchen, get out of my food storage, go build. I need you to fix this. I need you to fix that. And he was just like, here's all your assignments. You think you can eat my food for free? You can't. You weren't here to help buy it. You weren't here to store it. You don't get to eat it unless you do something to earn it today. And I was just like, yeah, that's on point, right? We need to have a smarter plan with our food storage than just, hey, I'm storing it. I got a year's supply of freeze-dried food from Poor Patriots. I'm all good, right?
That's a great point. Yeah,
that's smart, right? You've got to have a plan. You've got to start rotating. And so we're going to jump into some of the different things that we're doing. Hopefully that helps kind of inspire you. And hey, make sure you guys hit that like button on the live stream. That helps get this out to more people. And also make sure you hit that like and subscribe on every one of our podcasts, on every one of our shows, to help kind of grow the audience, help us get in touch with those that need to know what we're doing. And thank you we see a bunch of people in here already. Thank you for everyone that's jumped in and is participating already. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, and I think what we mean by advanced food, call it, is like you say, Scott, more than just buying that kit that's good for 4 people for 3 months or whatever and sticking it in your basement. It's far more than that. It's being involved on a daily basis. Okay, maybe not daily, maybe every other day, right? Whenever you're making a list to go to the store. I guess I call it an advanced technique, to I guess make my ego feel better, right? Is spending some time in front of that pantry, rotating and checking dates. I check dates and make sure I'm rotating properly. And then I have set in I've written schedule. Okay, this is how many of this item I want to have in stock, and so forth. Whether it be toilet paper or corn or whatever, And so I've gotten to the point where we talked a little bit in our last episode about kryptonite. What is a prepper kryptonite?
Yeah.
And I have had the problem with not rotating, not letting food expire, which is not a big deal. We've talked about that,
Mhm.
but I still use that to gauge where I'm at. But being very active in with my pantry, with um, what we eat, and so in our family, the way we eat, I don't find a lot of time to prepare a lot of from scratch meals. Maybe
Yeah.
once a week, maybe a little more often, not very often. So, uh, and I feel bad about that, So I think as part of my food storage, having individual components, and I say individual components, a very kind of a technical term, having the right ingredients, having the baking,
Yeah.
having all the small ingredients, and rotating that, and even getting down to where, okay, this container of baking soda will make me X amount of this recipe that bread recipe that, or rather biscuits, and trying to say I need X amount of these to make X amount of batches of biscuits, which will last me a certain amount of time. So that's probably more detailed that I think most people need to get with their food storage plans. However, that's the way I have become more comfortable. Instead of, I hate waste. I don't like having too much on my shelves and then it goes to waste because I'm not using. So I monitor those ratios to an extent, saying and try and every time I go to the store, make sure I have what I need for the 3 months prepper pantry that I have.
So I want to show you guys real quick. The screen, if you're watching the YouTube, you can see this is one of the most basic breakdowns of food storage. And I'm going to just touch on this for a second because then we're going to go into the advanced things. This is from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From 2006, they posted this. But one adult portion, this is your year supply of the most basics, right? 400 pounds of grains. That includes your wheat, your flour, your rice, your corn, your oatmeal, and pastas. 60 pounds of like your legumes, your beans, split peas, lentils, etc. Powdered milk, 16 pounds. Cooking oil, 10 quarts. Sugar or honey, 60 pounds. I think that should be double that for your honey because honey also has medicinal use. Salt, 8 pounds. I think you should double that as well. And because you do need electrolytes. They also say water, 2 weeks worth is a minimum to start. But I would also put in their baking soda um, because you can use that plus salt as an electrolyte mix to help with a lot of improvements of your life. That's like the most basic, right? That's starting point where a lot of people need to just let's do this first. Now, what we're talking about now is advanced. So let me show you what I use because there are so many better ways to do things. My wife and I created this tool. Um, Let me pull this up. And this is free if you go to preppertalkradio.com. This is in our free downloads. Um, so you go to this tab here. It's now shared. You guys can see this. It has instructions. So, how many adults do you have? We're going to go through this together. And this is going to give you your average, your minimum, maximum calories, and everything. So, Paris, can we use you as an example?
Sure.
How many adults are in your household?
So that would be over 18. 3.
Okay. All right. How many under 18? 18.
2
2. Okay.
in my house right now.
All right. So now this just calculated what you need for your household. So if you're trying to buy boxed stuff that tells you how many calories or servings, this kind of gives you a breakdown of what your calories and your servings should look like, right? Based on your minimum calories per day. So as a household, you're going to need 10,500 calories for your adults and 4,400 calories for your kids.
Wow.
And a lot of people don't think that way. And all the marketing companies are like, oh, you only need, 1,500 calories a day. And I'm like, since when? Since when?
Since the majority of Americans are overweight. That's why.
Right. But if you're now doing things and having to build and repair and maintain and grow a garden, all these other things you're going to have to do, you're going to need more calories. So
Hmm.
then you jump in, and this is where it gets fun. You can save a copy of this on your computer, and you can go in and you can start going through, and we inventory what we have in our kitchen, and then we inventory what we have in our storage room. So cans of peaches, we have 80 cans of peaches. Each can has 3.5 servings per can, and it tells you this right on the labels, and it tells you how many calories there are per serving. So now I plug all this information in these areas over columns B, C, and D. E, F, and G auto populate for you. And then it tells you, and here's my favorite part, it tells you how many days of food you have. So if you're looking at your 90-day goal, you're 21% to your goal with just what we've plugged in here.
Wow.
This is on the advanced side of things. This is your ingredient stuff. This is your, like, for example, we've got applesauce, we've got macaroni and cheese boxes, we've got rice. Like, you could throw everything in there and really start filling this up. We've done that. Ours is filled up, and I'm not going to show you what we have, but this is kind of where we started.
Now, also keep in mind that the labels you see on your cans and boxes and so forth are based on FDA requirements for, like you say, a certain amount of 2,000 calories per day per person. You know, if you're a 6'8", 240-pound guy, you're going to need a lot more than that. So, I use those because they're very quick. They're very easy to plug into a chart like this, right? I use those as a guide, not as a hard, fast rule.
Yeah.
And so I will make sure, like you say, the peaches, it shows one amount of serving is like maybe 100 calories, or maybe it's 80 calories or something like that, which is a couple of bites, honestly. It isn't. And, combined with rice and beans and so forth is your meal, where you want a 500, 6, 7, 800 calorie meal, depending on, that those are the types of things that if you're dialing down and trying to be more you get to a certain point where I had mentioned, okay, you get you got 30 days worth, you stick it in the basement, you're done. No, that's very beginner minded thinking, right? Whereas if you're dialing down and you don't have to question, if you're tracking all this, like Scott's showing, you don't have to question, do I really have enough food? And and you get to a certain point, okay, what can I add? If you have this all planned out, then you can say, I need some more baking soda, or I need some more, to where you get down to where I have, this might help explain where I'm coming from. I have 3 months on my pantry shelves, 3 months worth of food. I try to keep, that's the stuff we eat every day, where the kids like, where I don't have to, say, oh, we're going to make this from scratch, and you're going to try it and you're going to like it, right? I don't want to fight with my kids that way. So I have the 3 months on my shelf that way. I have 3 months in freeze-dried, high-quality freeze-dried, and then I have 6 months worth of bulk food. So at the beginning, we're going to start to integrate the bulk food to where we start to do more cooking from scratch. So I need to make sure I have all the recipes and all the ingredients I need for those recipes to cook what I have in storage. Otherwise, you're going to be boiling wheat berries to try and make them edible, right? Which is not going to be very fun to eat.
And so that's why we added these columns after talking to you the first time, as we created additional columns so now we have that's our prep inventory, pantry inventory. We also have our non-food list, which goes into like different things you should have, like your bullets, your bandages, different type of ointments, different things you might need if you've got babies. This has like a huge list of things you might need, right? And then short-term food list, the different things you might want, pears, pineapple, meats, beef, chicken, spam. Like we've got listed everything in there. And then your long-term stuff, like your active dry yeast, your all-purpose flour, really it should be, your rice, your beans, and we've kind of broken that down so you can see. And feel free to add to this, because when you're creating your list, you know what your family needs. Just like Shane said, like his pantry is the stuff he doesn't have to fight with his kids to eat. And your pantry should be the stuff you don't have to fight with your kids to eat either. Now, granted, in SHTF, they're going to be willing to eat a lot more things that they're not used to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so you've got to change those plans based on where they're aging and what they're doing and how much energy that you think they're going to need to spend on the daily, because that can change. And here's another advanced tactic. I'm going to stop sharing the screen because there's another screen I want to show you. This is why I changed the calorie intakes to what I did for this. Because when it comes to the right calories, you've got to look at your personal needs. So another fun screen is this macro calculator. I'm going to share this. Just go on Google and look for macro calculators. And you put in your age, your height, your weight, your activity levels, and your goal, right? So let's just say a 30-year-old male who's 5'10", 220 pounds, and they're sedentary. They want to maintain. So you just hit calculate. This tells you what you need in your proteins, your carbs, your fats, your sugars, your saturated fats, your food energy. So your food energy is your calories. They need about 2,300 calories just to maintain their weight. That's sedentary. Now, if you change this guy to all of a sudden active, very active, because they're now having to chop wood every day to survive, now he's at 3,388 calories. Does that make sense
Mm-hmm.
to change those things? I'm not sharing my screen, am I?
Yeah,
No,
you
you're
are.
good. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, I wasn't sure, but you've got to take those considerations in and plan for those things, right? Mike mentioned he plans as if all of his kids are adults.
Well, that's me.
That is wise.
That was me, Mike. I plan.
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, exactly. Because if I'm just storing for my kids as 10 years old, in 10 years, my food's gonna be good for 30 years. So if I don't have enough calories stored up when they're 15, 16, which they're probably eating twice as much as I would right now anyway, at 50 years old, they're eating more calories as teenagers than I am as an adult, right?
Well, then this goes into FIFO. I'm not talking about the Jolly Green Giant, FIFO, FOFO, here I come. Whatever. First in, first out, FIFO. You should be always upping your food storage and using the oldest stuff first. Like you should never have, and it's funny because we live in Utah and I come across this a lot. Oh, we bought wheat 20 years ago. Okay, cool. Wheat stores pretty much indefinitely, but when was the last time you checked on it? 20 years ago? Okay, let's open up one and see how it's doing, right? It's just in a container in the garage. Oh, it's in the garage, is it? Your garage gets 110 degrees in the summer. That's great. That's ruining your food, right? I found food that's just bad, spoiled, rotten, because people don't store it in the right places or they don't rotate it. Rotate. Use it and get rid of it.
I had when something expires, I know it's good for for many years beyond that, but I will actually take that and set that aside into its own little section, right? Because right now I have the luxury of doing that, and there is a little bit of a stigma, right, with with the wife, with the older kids who are able to fix meals, that if they see a date that's beyond the best by date, if it says expired or if it says best by, okay, that mentally says I can go beyond that date. And yes, a year or two is pushing it in the minds of my family. So I'll take those and set those aside. And I actually had a can of beans pop the other day, made a mess in my storage room.
There
Oh,
you go.
dang.
Baked
How old was
beans
it?
popped, and yeah. Sorry, go ahead and address Cindy's comment there.
Well, no. How old were those beans?
They were only about 2 years over the date.
Okay.
So I was a little surprised that they popped. I've still got other good cans in there, but
Yeah, that is kind of surprising. Was it one of the pull tab lids?
no, it was not.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand. So that's one of the things I'm trying to understand is the length of time a pull tab can will maintain the food quality versus a regular can where you have to use a can opener. But Sydney did mention, yes, it's just extra sprouted wheat. It'll be fine.
That's true.
Right. One of the things I'm going to be doing when I need to use more wheat in a basic form is sprouting. Like you brought that up a couple of episodes ago. Sprouting that wheat increases the calories. It changes into more proteins. Like, it's amazing. Just adding water and sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with like potatoes. I've got
Just
potatoes
light,
stored.
yeah.
You know, as soon as those potatoes sprout, guess what? I can go plant those in the dirt and grow more potatoes with
Mhm.
just a little
Mhm.
dirt and water and sun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And sprouting is important because you got to have one of the things that a lot of people will store is because rice and wheat are super easy to store and they're great for bulking up a meal. You know,
Mhm.
if you add, rice really doesn't have a flavor, so you can kind of add it to anything.
Mhm.
And what I recommend and what my wife and I are doing right now actually is we just decided, let's try some different recipes. We've been eating the same thing for our
Mhm.
Sunday night dinner we rotate between 2 or 3 different things. And I'm like, you know what, let's actually expand and try some new recipes. And so along the lines of what we're talking about today is if you have a bunch of rice and a bunch of wheat and a bunch of beans, but you don't have any recipes, you're not going to really have as much of a successful opportunity as you could if you just have some recipes. Another thing that I think is important to add to that is spices. You've got to have,
yeah.
there's spices, dry spices. You can go to the Asian markets or the Spanish markets and you can get some really good spices for really cheap. Or you can just grab the ones at the local store that are in the bottles and just start stocking up on spices too. Because one of the things that you'll notice, at least I've noticed, is that tomato sauce goes with pretty much anything. And you throw in your beans and rice
Mhm.
and some tomato sauce, and that could be a meal because there's protein, there's carbs, there's all those things right in there. And so it's important to keep those types of things in mind, like store stuff, get your calories, but then also know how to prepare it, know how to fix it. If you have a bunch of freeze dried foods, it's already in a box, you just add water in it and it creates the meal. But if you don't have that, then you're going to need to know how to cook and recipe some of these things and put them all together. So one of the long-term recipes that I found was, I think it was called Irish stew or something like that. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like 13 bean soup and rice and tomato sauce. And you can cook a pot of that and throw it on the oven, and it just sits there all day, and you should eat as you want, and it just goes. And that's one of the things that back in the old days, mom or whoever would cook, and it was a pot of stew, and they'd come in from the farm or come in from working in the field, and they just eat a little bit of stew, and
Mhm.
that pot sat there for sometimes
Yeah.
days, and then they'd add more to it the next day, and it would just kind of like one pot lasted a week. And that's the kind of that type of mentality of how to now prepare this food into a meal that we would eat is another level.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on Mike's comment here. Is that he finds it very difficult to get enough calories without having fats and proteins as well. I would also guess as well, Mike, to try and eat enough vegetables and grains in a day to get enough calories. That is really not that easy. It's pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one who tries not to eat a whole lot of meat, but carbs are kind of my staple. But it can be very difficult, especially if it's like you say, just grains, and you're trying to, like Mike says, he says, yeah, he's used to eating um, cracked wheat or whatever. That's just not something that I'm used to, in our family, we're used to doing. And it's definitely not easy. So it definitely takes some planning. And like you say, perhaps to have recipes and spices to be able to eat enough calories when you don't necessarily have proteins to augment.
I think you're on
Scott, I
mute,
think you're
Scott.
muted. Scott. Oh, can't hear you, Scott.
Somehow I got muted. I don't know what
Oh,
I
there
did.
you go.
But Sydney mentioned, Prep Center mentioned spices typically are cheaper buying whole and grinding them yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It also lasts longer. Coriander seed is cheaper than buying it ground, right? Here's another cool thing. And she can explain more on this. Like, fats are one of the most important things that we need to be talking about. A lot of the stuff you're going to buy, especially your freeze dried stuff, they've pulled as much fat out as possible,
Mm-hmm. That's true.
right? In your long term storage stuff, they're going to pull the oils and the fats out, right? Spam, corned beef, all our friends over at survivalfrog.com, they have canned meats that are good for, I think it's 30 years.
Yeah, a
Mm-hmm.
long time.
And I've tasted it. There's plenty of fat in there. It's great.
Or just
And
go see Sydney and she'll teach you how to can meat.
yeah, or go see Sydney Prep Center. But these Do we have a coupon code for those?
For what? The meat?
For the meat?
Yeah, Survival Frog is Prepper Talk. If you use Prepper
Yeah.
Talk, you get 10% off.
So guys, go check out survivalfrog.com. They've got canned meats, plenty of fats in it, long-term storage, and there's no additives other than salt. They just cook it in its own juices. It's amazing. You've got to store things like that. Like go to the butcher, get all the fats, get all the stuff, and learn how to make tallow, right? Because that'll store what, a year and a half almost, and that's fats. And you can use it to cook with. You can even use it to start making candles, but it's a fat source. Another thing you need to start looking at is livestock. Now, don't go out and think, oh, I'm just getting rabbits, because
And
rabbits
some
are very
goats
low
and
in fat, right? Get some goats, get some milking goats, right? Get chickens. They're going to have a little more fat than a rabbit's going to have. But get things, especially post SHTF, like you need to have a growing meat source that has fats.
and fats, I think, are definitely overlooked because we tend, we've been taught my entire life that a low-fat diet is important, right? To avoid fats, you want skim milk, you want low-fat this, low-fat that. That's an absolute lie. You want to avoid the sugars. And if something doesn't taste good without fats. If you don't have fats, then it doesn't taste good. So if you're buying food commercially, they're adding sugar to it to make it taste good, which is terrible for you. And like I say, it's like cocaine. It's addictive. It's horrible for you. So fats are good for you, and that is definitely a weakness of mine. Is how do we add more fats into your diet? It's good for your brain. It's good for everything. And like you say, spam. Pork is not this is my favorite fat, but beef and chicken doesn't have much fat, but beef fats I think are like very important. Is get to know a local like where I have my bug out location. It's all cow country. They're raising cattle up there, and there are a few processors up there where I can go and source half a cow if I want, their whole cow if I want. So that's my plan at the moment. But I think having stuff immediately, canned chicken, which I get at Costco, right? And it's some good stuff, or canned beef. They have that as well. Canned salmon as well. That's part of my my 30-day pantry. My 3-month pantry. It's like you say here, preps are saying your body needs salt and fat. Absolutely, salt was on my list as well. I've got about 150 pounds of salt in my storage. So and yes, a lot of spices are great, but you got to have salt. Salt, you can do so much with salt.
Well, it's interesting because when the Israelites left Egypt, they were given in the law in Leviticus, I think it's 2. The Lord's like, put salt on everything. That's part of the new covenant that I'm making with you. And it's because they didn't know that, like, they're leaving where they're hostage, where they're slaves, and they don't know what to do with their lives now. They don't know how to live without being told everything to do. That's why the law was so big for them, right? Now we're living pretty much 3 commandments, right? Love God, love your neighbor as thyself, and then a new commandment that Jesus gave us is to love one another as I have loved you, right? Hopefully we can go back and spend some time in the Old Testament to learn how to eat, how to cook. Daniel, if you look through Daniel, he was pretty much a vegetarian, and he was doing just fine. So whatever you need to do to work for you, make sure you're following the rules of first in, first out. Build up your 90-day pantry, extend it out to a year, and grow your resilience. The more you have taken care of, especially in food storage, psychologically, you're going to have a much better success rate, if you will, in longevity of getting through disasters. Because emotionally, when you're going through a hard time, what's your favorite thing to do?
Eat.
Everybody does this.
Foods.
Oh man, yeah. I'm so stressed today. I just want to sit on the couch and eat. Right? I need, what do they call it? A special kind of food.
It's comfort food.
Comfort food. Thank you. I'm like totally mind lost there on second, but everyone's like, oh, I need my comfort foods, right? And Utah Mike, I was about to say this too. Like sardines packed in oil. Get your tuna fish in oil, right?
Yeah, that's true.
You can use it as a fire source too, and you can use it to cook other things. But like those oils, as gross as they may seem at the moment, you're gonna find you love it in a little while.
Yeah.
In a survival situation, like, oh man, we got sardines. Oh, lucky us. We haven't had meat or oils in 3 months.
Yeah. I mean, another good thing about long-term storage after you've got your 90-day supply, that's of course what we're talking about is after the 90-day supply. So if you haven't got the 90-day supply, go back and watch that video and then come back to this one. But if you have rice, a bunch of rice, even if that's all you ever got, you're going to be able to add that to your 90-day food supply pantry. And that's going to extend it at least another month or two, probably. You're going to be able to expand what you have with just some extra rice and around. And then you add supplies and spices to that. It's great.
Add it to soup, add it to pretty much anything canned you have in your pantry, you can add rice to. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, here's a thought too, is like we talked about a cup of rice has 200 calories. A cup of whole grain wheat has 406 calories.
Mm-hmm.
That's before you sprout it. That's like, so if you're looking, oh, what can I store? What makes more sense to store? Oh, I don't have a grinder. I can't grind wheat. Sprout it, boil it, crack it. It's like there's so many different things you can do, but it's more calories per storage space, right?
And
it's going to do better for you.
Sprouting microgreens is a fantastic source of protein. I mean, there's if you can't afford, and I recognize the cans of meat can be expensive. So if you're not in a position where you can do that, at least learn how to do sprouting and microgreens, because that's going to give you the proteins that you're going to need. And it's plant protein, so it's going to be also good carbs and good, nutritional value as well. I mean, there's a lot of nutritional value in red meat and regular meat sources as well. So just alternatives is what we're kind of sharing here, is that if you don't have a way to pay for canned meat and have a 6-month supply of that for your whole family, at least do microgreens and learn how to do that. And that's one of the things I actually bought a class on how to sprout microgreens, and I'm going to be learning how to do that here as soon as possible, because that's something I think that's really valuable.
What's interesting is like if you look at the calorie count of sprouted wheat versus regular wheat, you're almost cutting your calories in half, but you're doubling and tripling. So you're doubling your fats and you're tripling your protein when you sprout it. You also have to remember, like when you sprout it, it takes up more space. So you had all these little tiny things of wheat, and now it's like boom. So there's so many benefits and advantages to sprouting. Like it's crazy how much more stuff you can get. And then obviously you can actually plant your wheat and grow it. Can you plant your rice and grow it? No.
I've never seen too is the wheat. If you have animals, especially like chickens and stuff, and you can sprout and microgreens and feed it to your chickens, and that's going to give you more healthy eggs. So it kind of cycles around if you want to get into that, far into it. But for sure, when you have your 90-day supply set, run through this calculation that Scott shared earlier, this spreadsheet. Make sure you have enough of those dry goods, those staples in your pantry. And then another thing that a lot of people forget about is when they buy wheat, a lot of times they'll buy wheat that's not that's red wheat or regular wheat, and that's hard. You got to have a grinder. And so buy a grinder. And the other thing too, is I would buy a grinder that can be both electric and hand ground, because if you run out of electricity, you're going to need to be able to have a way to grind that wheat into flour. So understanding that buying wheat is fantastic, but then you got to know how to turn it into flour. Otherwise you're going to be up a creek. The other thing too is I would suggest,
and you can just
two rocks together. You could do it like the Indians did, I guess, or the Native Americans. What's the politically correct here? Anyways, I would say every once in a while I would recommend, and I probably need to do this myself, but every once in a while I would recommend cooking up a meal, like getting up some of your rice, getting your beans, getting your long-term. You don't necessarily have to pull it from your storage, but at least the stuff that's in your storage, go get something and cook it and eat it. Eat a meal without all that sugar. Eat a meal without all those spices in it, and get your palate kind of used to maybe a little more bland foods. I mean, we didn't have all the fancy spices and sugars and stuff, 100 years ago, and people survived. So try it I would suggest trying it every, once a month or however often you want to, but I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, you know,
Well, another
I was going to comment on your comment about Native Americans, Indians out in eastern Utah. Signs everywhere, Indian tribe. They do refer to them as Indians in eastern Utah. So
Okay, nice.
so
so going back to the foods and fats, coconut oil, virgin coconut oil. If you keep it cool, so storing it in your basement, it's good for 18 months. We've got like 3 or 4 cans of that, and we go through one every probably year.
that's more
So
healthy for you.
it takes us a long time, but there's 15 grams of fat per teaspoon. So you can cook with it. You can add it to things. Like there's more than, you've got to start thinking bigger as a prepper. Like we've got to actually, this is where I think most of the preppers I talk to, they don't do any research on their foods. They see, oh, there's a sweet deal at this food storage place, I'm gonna buy a bunch. Okay, and I've been guilty of that. That's why I can make fun of it. I'm poking fun at myself first, because these are the lessons I've learned. Like I bought crap tons of food from Thrive years ago, and
emergency essentials.
I sat there and not knowing what to do with it for a while. I'm like, I don't know. It's all just individual ingredients. I don't know what to do with this. And so then I'm like, you know what? It's a bad idea. I'm not going to buy any more of that. And I started buying emergency essentials. And guess what happened? It went bad.
Oh no.
When you mix everything up and put it in a can, freeze dried, it has the ability to get bacteria and grow stuff depending on how it's prepared, right? A lot of the companies will freeze dry, add freeze dry ingredients, and then they'll add dehydrated ingredients, and those two do not bode well together. So I've seen personally cans of pancake mix pop, number 10 cans. It bulges and pops because it goes bad. And so you've got to think about, okay, am I buying food that's completely been freeze dried? Or is it a mix of freeze dried and dehydrated? Because if it's just freeze dried or it's just dehydrated, it's going to store a lot longer, separate of each other. But I wasted a lot of money on stuff that I thought I would like and my family would like, and I found going back to just regular ingredients does better for me.
Well, obviously this is quite a learning process, right? I mean, I think most preppers when they get started, it's prepping 101, right? It's get your 30 days, get your basics and so forth. And then, as you know, Sydney on this call has found out, we all, and I'm generalizing, is a lot of preppers end up becoming homesteaders, right? I mean, that is the process. That is the advanced food storage, the advanced prepping, whatever course you want to call that, is growing your own garden, canning your own food, raising your own animals, and being self-sufficient that way. So that is, I think, even far beyond what we're talking here.
And if you don't like that term, you can use hobby farming.
There you go.
I love that term.
And you know, and community is a big part about it as well. I think that's another advanced term we need to talk about is community, raising food within your community in a planned way to where you're doing potatoes and your neighbor's doing corn and so forth. And I mean, that tends to need a more rural community to do that, or just a lot of good planning and a lot of getting to know a lot of good people who think like you, who want to be self-sufficient like you, and working together with them.
My thought process was I get 90-day supply of rotated foods that we eat every day, just easy in the pantry, that home storage. And then it was going to be another 3 months of freeze-dried food meals. Another, I bought the 4 Patriots. I've bought the Ready, whatever it is. And then we're actually going to be, hopefully we're working with the Ready Project to get some of their stuff. And I want to have 3 months of food that's freeze-dried. And then that gives me 6 months of food. And then beyond that is where I'm going to get into all of the canned foods, the rice, the beans, the things of that nature. One of the things that I realized is that if I get, for example, I've tried some of the freeze-dried peak freeze-dried foods are really yummy.
That's Thrive. Thrive makes that.
Is it? Yep. So I tried one of their meals and I was like, wait a minute, if I took this meal, this flavoring, and added a cup or two of rice, it could actually, this one packet could probably feed my whole family.
Yep.
and it, the juices and the stuff that you put in that
Flavoring, yeah.
kind of flavoring, it goes into the rice, and it absorbs, and it becomes a bigger meal. And so I felt like I could take these freeze-dried foods and expand them maybe even another 3 months because
Yep.
of the rice and the beans and the other things that I had. And so I realized that in doing, my 90-day pantry, then my 90 days of freeze-dried foods, I could actually probably expand that and be anywhere from 9 months. And then especially if I have like beans and rice and some of these other, like pastas, those types of things, like macaroni noodle. Like, it's good to have macaroni, from the box, from the store. However, I would recommend that you get the noodles, just the noodles, not all the sodium, the mix, whatever it is. Just get the noodles as well and store those, because you can add a bunch of things to those. I mean, Top Ramen is the noodles themselves. You can put all kinds of things in with those bare noodles. You don't have to put the packet of, sodium rich death, packet that's there.
Well,
And you can
and
expand that and grow it. And that's what my mentality was. If I have the basics, I can expand it with rice and beans and other things and make it even last longer.
what I'm sure Scott will agree with me here is, we ate a lot of freeze-dried food when we were doing PrepperCon. We get a lot of free stuff, a lot of just going and trying a lot of different foods. Some of those, the flavor is so intense, you can barely get through a single meal with it.
Yeah.
So that's where it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, let's add some rice to it. Let's cut it down. Let's stretch it, extend it. So that definitely takes some trying different brands and figure out what you like, because they're not all the same. They have their different flavors, the different palate. They're using different methods. Like you say, Scott, they're combining freeze dried with dehydrated and such, and they have their own recipes. And you might not like some of the recipes. You're going to have to try them. And there was one that stood out to me, like Numana. I don't think they're even around anymore, are they, Scott? But
yeah, Numana.
That was so strong that I couldn't even get through a meal.
They were a healthy version of things, but it was very high, which was funny because they called themselves a healthy option, but they were very sodium high.
Very high in sodium.
They didn't last very long. But there's other companies like Ready Hour, which is also extremely high in sodium. One of the things I find is I get plugged up eating their food, so I, as a rule, won't buy it. They also have the highest budget for marketing, so that tells you the quality of the food. You got to look at the quality of the food going into the can as part of the research that you do when you're looking at all these different types of food storage. But like Paris said, you can add a cup of rice to things, right? You can add a can of beans, right? You can add so many different things. I grew up in Idaho. Guess what we added to everything?
Potatoes.
Potato. So everything became a potato stew. We'd even just take potatoes and mash them all up and turn it into a potato soup. Add a few little onions. Like, there's so many different things you can do to make any type of food go longer, right? And by go longer, I mean feed more bellies. But I think the most incredible thing I've ever seen or heard of when it comes to making your food go farther is, I don't know if you guys remember, there's this guy in Jerusalem or near Jerusalem who took just a few loaves and a few fish. It was 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And he fed over 5,000 people.
Yeah. And I think he did it more than once.
And the thing I want to point out is in the scriptures, it says it's 5,000 men and their families.
Yeah.
They only counted the men.
Yeah.
So it could have been like 15, 16,000 people.
Easy.
So have faith. Don't just like, I'm only going to store 5 pounds of stuff or 5 loaves of bread for long term, but have faith in Jesus. Have faith in God that when times get really tough, have the faith that he will multiply for you too. He loves you as much as he loves anybody else.
The story of the widow of Zarephath.
That was the next thing I was going to, please share that one.
Well, it was, and of course you put me on the spot here.
I know.
It was, who was the prophet? Daggett?
Elijah.
Paris. Elijah. Yes, Elijah. There's a famine and it's really bad. And Elijah is commanded to go and speak to this woman. And he is, of course, starving as well. And so he says, make for me first. And the widow of Zarephath was there at the well and was going to go and had a little bit of meal in a barrel and a little bit of oil in a cruse, and they're going to make their final meal and then die, right? And and then Elijah commands her to make for me first. And what happened is they ate for many days after that, right? The barrel of meal did not waste, the cruse of oil did not fail, and they ate for many days. So I absolutely believe this is a true principle, that if we share, and we talked a little bit about this at our last one about what our weaknesses are, what our kryptonite is, and it can be that we care. That can be a weakness, and we give away too much.
Mhm.
That may not necessarily be the case. If you have the faith, if you have the means, and you're asked to share, and you're inspired to share, then God can multiply what we have. And I absolutely believe in that. As long as you're being obedient, right? And part of that obedience
What's
is
interesting
is doing the work, preparing and getting the food storage and having what you need. Then He will multiply it.
What's interesting is the widow of Zarephath wasn't a bloodline Israelite, so she was outside the covenant, quote unquote. And so it's interesting because a lot of people think, well, I'm so righteous, I'm a believer, I'll be saved. Well, why didn't Elijah go to the Israelites? Why didn't Elijah go to the covenant people to prove that that story? He went outside that. So it's we definitely need to do our part, and we need to be aware of that. And so I personally believe that I actually, before I moved to Utah, I had a bunch of food storage. I had enough to feed my whole family for, I had my supply. And one of the things that what's funny is in the LDS community, we're very into food storage. And so it's like every time you help a LDS or a Mormon move from one house to another, it's going to be one truckload of food storage, probably, boxes of cans of food.
True.
Anyway, so I actually was prompted by the Holy Spirit to give away most of my food storage before I moved, and only bring a little bit. And then when I got to Utah, I was and I told I felt like I would be okay. And then when I got to Utah, I just restocked and I eventually built up my stock again. And of course, I'm still building, I'm still growing, and still, that's one of the things that I think is about food storage, is that if you're constantly rotating the 90-day pantry, and you're constantly looking at different foods you can add. I've bought rice and beans and pastas, and I have potatoes, flakes, and I have pancakes, and I have dried milk, and I have all these things. And then I was like, you know what? That's going to be gross if I don't have spices. So then I started getting my spices, and then I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should have some canned soups and stuff. So I have shelves of cans of soup. And I don't think I'll ever stop. My wife is like, are we done with the food storage yet? I'm like,
as long as there's room in the house,
we're never done.
I'm going to pile it up in the middle of the room and throw a blanket over it. Right.
It's food storage is that important. I'm just telling you that it doesn't stop. You just get better at it, and you get more, you fill in those gaps once you've put one piece on the puzzle, you realize, okay, that piece fit just nicely, but I have a piece over here that's missing. So you don't know it's missing until you start really putting those puzzle pieces together to look at the whole of it. And then you start to see, oh, this is missing, I'll go add that. And that's where I think the advanced food storage comes. But you've got to start putting the pieces together that and actually, like you said, Shane, do it. You actually have to do it, and you have to do your part, and you'll be able to multiply it, because God will bless those that do their part, or you'll be able to say, hey, I did my part, and then you can claim blessings, because you can say, God, I did my part. I need you to help fill in the difference here, and that's something that's another part of it as well.
Amen.
Well, that's the key. Is like you've got to do your part. All throughout the scriptures, all throughout every example I've ever seen, the Lord asks us to do our part first, and then He magnifies our efforts. If you're coming to this and you're listening to this and you're like, man, I don't have any money, do what you can. And ask the Lord to multiply that money to be able to get more stuff, or to introduce you to people that can help you expand what you have, right? We talked about community gardens before. We've talked about kind of planning with your neighbors. Okay, you plant the beans and the corn, and I'll do potatoes, and right? You can work together. And there's an app I love. It's called Farmish. You can go find people who are doing that, and you can buy your eggs and everything else locally. from someone who's growing, shrinking that supply chain. Well, creating a community that does the supply chain yourself is the most incredible thing you can do. And it helps share the message of preparedness. It also helps share the message of the gospel, because there's no reason to prep if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in a higher power, because you'll see all the stuff that's going on in the world and you'll go, screw it, I'm done. I don't want to live through all this. But if you believe that something better is coming, which is the return of our Savior, then you're going to want to prep so you can watch the show, because it's going to get good.
Yep.
I want to be here for real good. It's going to get bad too.
So what you're saying basically is add popcorn to your food storage.
100%. We've got lots of popcorn. That's like my wife's staple food. If I don't have popcorn, I don't have anything.
Yeah, when things are burning down, you just go over there and you have your little popcorn.
Watching it from a distance, hopefully, and yeah, awesome. I absolutely agree with you, Scott. I want to be there to see all the amazing things that are going to happen, and hopefully it won't be too painful. But
so you heard it here, folks.
Got to prove yourself.
You're prepping for a purpose. You're prepping for something better, right? Get through the bad so you can enjoy all the good, right? But also, everything we're doing in our preparedness and our food storage, it's for a smarter living. If you lose your job tomorrow, that's one less thing you have to worry about if you've got a pantry for 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
You can spend more time finding that new job because you've got food set aside. You've got some resources set aside, right? You've got more than 90 days worth of soaps and cleaners and deodorants and everything else set aside. So you don't have to spend that money for the next 90 days. It's fiscally responsible to do food storage and have a home store, if you will.
Yeah.
It makes so much
things
sense.
That aren't food, like you mentioned, Scott, having those deodorants and shampoos and toothpastes and toothbrushes. I have that stuff too. I think we may have neglected that topic throughout the show, but definitely glad you brought it up at the end here.
You can't eat it, so.
Well, and that's the point. Like, this is more about food storage, but you also look at it as your overall plan. That's part of things you need to look at. And Sandy pointed out food grade buckets. They're fantastic for storing food. I've got stacks of them that I've got food in, some of them, and others they're waiting in the wings to be fed, right? They're waiting for the wheat to be bagged and dropped in there. They're waiting for the beans. I bought a box of beans. Yes, a box of beans. I've got 4 boxes of beans that we got from Restaurant Supply Company. And we're going to put those in Mylar, and we're going to dump them in those big buckets. And we're going to have more, right? And then when we're hungry for beans, I got some white beans. I think they call them navy beans. I've got the white ones. I've got black beans. I've got kidney beans. I've got pinto beans. I'm going to have plenty of stuff to have gas for the rest of my life. Like, it's going to be great.
I was going to say, good fuel
Storing
source.
the musical fruit.
I'm going to be, you know what? I'm going to be Dutch ovening everybody. I guess, no, covered wagon. I don't know what they call it. But anyways, I'll gas out the crowd. You have been listening to Prepper Talk Radio. And for those of you who are here on the live, we thank you for your participation, for joining in. You guys are fantastic. If you have questions, if you are new to this, if you're advanced at this, no matter where you are on that path in that journey of preparedness, hop into our group on Facebook, Emergency Prep and Self-Reliance. Join in the conversation. Share what you've learned. You may know some things that we've never talked about that can help somebody else be better prepared, as well as ask all the questions you can, because there's some great minds in that group. Also, if you've seen some things on here that you're like, wow, I'd really like to do that, check out our website, preppertalkradio.com, and go to the free resources pages, download those, and then check out, if you want to support the show, check out the books that we recommend. Buy any one of those on Amazon. It'll help put a little change in their pockets to help us broadcast more episodes. And most importantly, focus on that relationship with God. We do this because we love God, and we love our families, and we love this country. We want to help you out to be able to persevere and get through anything that's going on. Prepping is not just for the apocalypse. It's for every day. That's why we prep. I've used it to get through joblessness. I've used it to get through times of injury and sickness. It works in every scenario. It's the most incredible insurance policy to have. So make sure you take one out. Make sure you get your food storage and your water storage and your prepping plan going. And hey, Let's help you get involved. Thank you for being here. Don't just stay ready. Stay ready-minded.
We'll see you next week.
Take care, guys.